The fire hose of news from America can feel like a lot these days.
If you're trying to figure out what to make of it all, we got you.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Paul Hunter. We're correspondents here in Washington,
working just around the corner from where much of the action is taking place.
2 blocks from the White House.
And that's the name of our new podcast.
For top-notch analysis of U.S. politics from a Canadian perspective, find 2 blocks from the White House every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts,
including YouTube.
Weight Watchers now offers access to affordable GLP-1s. It works for members like...
I'm Haley, and I've lost 100 pounds. Weight Watchers has everything I need, from weight loss medications to nutrition support and help with my side effects. It's all in one place.
Weight Watchers handles the insurance for you and offers affordable cash pay options. With our program, our members are losing more weight with expert nutrition and side effect support.
I'm Mike, and I've lost 135 pounds. Weight Watchers prescribing GLP-1 medications. It's been life-changing.
I'm Sharia, and I lost 80 pounds on Weight Watchers. I realized that it would take more than a prescription to lose weight and feel good on a GLP-1.
Better results, expert support, lose more weight, make it last.
I can't imagine doing a GLP-1 without Weight Watchers.
Get started for as low as $25 at weightwatchers.com/GLP1. For over 60 years, we've helped millions of members find what works for them. Now, it's your turn. Weight Watchers. Watch it work.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Images and videos of transit buses set ablaze, travelers running for their lives in airports, and billows of black smoke coming from businesses continue to circulate online as the world watches the unraveling of gang-related violence unfold in Mexico. It comes in the wake of the death of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, otherwise known as El Mencho, the man who led one of the most violent criminal groups in Mexico, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. His death on Sunday has been followed by what looks to be a living nightmare in the home country of more than 130 million people and in the place where tens of thousands of Canadians spend their winters. And that's exactly where more than 26,000 of them are today, with Canadian Airlines suspending operations over the weekend as cartel members ensue war with local police and the Mexican National Guard in retribution for killing their leader, El Mencho. I'm Maria Kestane, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking to Jerry Flores, a professor at the University of Toronto, to break down all that's unfolding in Mexico, including the brazen violence amid the fallout of El Mencho's death and how Canadians and the rest of the world are making sense of it. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
Jerry, I want to go right back to where this all began. I know the history is rich and comprehensive, but if you can, take us through the past 20 years and how we got to this point today.
Yeah, so I'll try to take it back to 20 years, although some academics and historians argue that this actually started in the late 1800s after the United States passed the Chinese Exclusionary Act, preventing Chinese peoples from entering the U.S. A lot of those folks came in through Mexico and an attempt to go into the U.S. were denied and then actually set up shop and were sort of credited with starting semi-illicit stuff like the opium trade, which then turned into the marijuana trade, which in the last 20 or 30 years has escalated into, well, still marijuana, cocaine, and now fentanyl. So these sort of illicit markets, these gray markets have existed from Latin America into the U.S., where all the demand for drugs exists, for a very, very long time. But going back 20 years ago, starting to 20 years, moving our way to Monday, we have one of the largest cartel bosses who was sort of like fighting for control, Nemesio or El Mencho, who was recently killed.
What was it like between El Mencho and law enforcement, and what was the tension in the relationship there?
Yeah, so I think El Mencho really took over or came into existence after El Chapo, who is famously known because of Netflix and so many other sort of like forms of media, was kind of pushed out of the fray or was kind of taken out of things. Nemesio to power, which is what happens often. When you move one leader from a cartel, another one comes up. And in truth, the last 20 years, which sort of encapsulates the epoch or the time that my parents left Mexico and moved to Los Angeles, which is where I was born, um, you have a lot of the same. You have tremendous amounts of inequality. So, like a lot of poverty in Mexico, a lack of opportunities for people to gain upward social mobility or to make a life for themselves through formal means. University degrees, credentials meant very little. And so, what you did have was a very accessible life that paid immediately working for the cartel. So, lots of poor kids like Nemesio decided to start working for the cartel, guarding marijuana fields, sort of like taking care of crops. And so you have this along with political and police corruption in the US and in Mexico. And then you have the proliferation of cartels because just like you would have perhaps like a young kid trying to sell cocaine or marijuana in Toronto or Winnipeg or Montreal, for a lot of young people here, this is the way that you get ahead. This is the way that you support your family and yourself, albeit, folks in this world tend to have a very short career.
What was the inception point, I guess, for El Mencho and law enforcement? When was his first run in, or when did he kind of get on the Mexican government's radar?
So I think he wasn't on the radar for a long time. I think he initially started his career, as so many young kids do, working in Michoacan, which is where sort of share my people's ancestral lands. It appears that he sort of made his way to the United States in the 1980s, where he sort of honed his trade. He started selling heroin, he started selling cocaine. I think he initially was arrested after selling heroin to an undercover police officer. He was incarcerated in California State Prison, where it appears he connected with other members of organized crime, exported those skills to Mexico, and started to set up his drug empire. And I think he really rose to power after El Chapo was sort of like incarcerated and started getting more attention and wasn't able to move as freely.
For Mexicans and people that live in the country, what do you think that reality is like for them, knowing that these notorious gangs and cartels are an active part of their country's political fabric, even though those reminders may not be as overt or as everyday as what it's been like the past couple days?
It's an everyday reality for everyday Mexicans. So like for working class Mexicans, for indigenous peoples in Michoacan and Jalisco, cartels, political violence exists constantly. So much so that there's been a rise in tensions for a while now, where several organizations have formed their own police forces, which are called autodefensas. These groups became so big that they were actually sort of like taken over, some by the federal government, and some became a part of the narco trafficking world, all to try to keep their communities and themselves safe and fed and paid and to meet their basic needs. So it is ever present. I have personally family members of mine that had disappeared due to dubious circumstances. A cousin of mine was abducted with her children in the car. So cartel violence is everywhere. It's a large part of the reason why so many people, like my parents, left our ancestral lands and had to come to different places like Toronto, Los Angeles, Montreal. And here we are.
Have we seen this kind of violent eruption like what's happening in Mexico right now before in relation to other killings of cartel members or any sort of gang-related violence?
So I think anytime a cartel leader is killed, you have a couple of things that happen. One is you have a massive So first, you have retaliation, which is what's happening now. So cartel members and sort of other associates, sort of like that have been contracted to stir up trouble with informal blockades, burning down cars, like shooting at police forces. This is what happens. Number one. Number two, there is an internal fight for power, which spills out of the community. And third, you have fighting that intensifies between local, municipal, and federal police forces. So sadly, I always tell people, I've seen this tragic comedy before. The same processes are going to repeat themselves. So when you kill a gang leader, government comes out on top for a bit, fight for internal power, violence in the streets, status quo, more violence, and the people who suffer are always the most marginalized: children, women, working class, working poor people, indigenous peoples. More of the same.
You call it a tragic comedy.
It is a tragic comedy. It's perhaps it's not so hilarious anymore, but as an academic, I have seen these cycles unfold so many times. I've done research with mostly women of color and indigenous women placed at risk. in Mexico, in the United States, and in Canada, and the same patterns appear. In these circumstances, the reason that so many people are attracted to the narco trafficking world is simply because you have so many individuals who are living in abject poverty. No, as I said before, no ways of getting ahead, and you're stuck with you starve to death, you live in poverty, or you work for a cartel or for a gang, and you try to make ends meet. And it is tough. There's so many little kids out there who dream of having a home and taking care of their family or having a car, and they see this as the only viable way of doing so. So it's really tragic.
You alluded to it in your previous answer, but obviously the killing of a drug lord should be celebrated as a victory. But we know that there are leaders, or members of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel waiting in line for that leader role. If you could kind of speak to it, what are usually the next steps for these cartels when a leader is killed?
Yeah, so a cartel is basically operates almost like any other paramilitary organization. There's somebody who's on top. There's a series of lieutenants, sergeants, and so forth, and so forth. It operates very much like a military, albeit a smaller and more violent military. But what you would have is a discussion about who's next in line, who the Mencho mentioned should take over. Sometimes people accept it for who it is, and sometimes it just leads to more violence. From what we're seeing in Mexico, this is the initial phase. A person leading this or a group of people saying, go out to the underlings, make trouble, make them pay for what they did. And then I think as time goes by, as weeks pass, we're going to see more internal violence, which we might be privy to and we might not. It sort of depends. Like technology has increased so much that perhaps some of the modalities of war that we see with large superpowers in the world, like kind of like proxy warfare via drones, it could be that this is the newest manifestation of it. We don't know because we've never seen something like this happen in the current day sort of epoch, and like with the current day access to technology where we can sort of like send coordinates where we want explosives to arrive. So but I really do think that some of these more like micro battles mirror what we see out in the world. And there's already pictures out there and with cartel in armored vehicles and with them using drones and attacking helicopters. So we're going to have to wait and see. We don't know.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
How does the work of local law enforcement play a role in these killings and sanctioning of these cartels? What is the impact of local police in these situations?
Local law enforcement are in a very, very difficult situation. So they are provided little to no resources, very, very little pay, and they're supposed to tackle these massive problems. And oftentimes, if they fight back against corruption or against attempted bribes, they are murdered. So what ends up happening is they're stuck in a real situation. They can leave, they can go to a different town. Some of them can make a stand on their own and say, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. But they will be targeted, they will be taken away, or they will eventually either disappear or be found dead. It's a really sticky situation, and it's not a secret that local police departments are rife with corruption. They're sort of like narco trafficking plants in there. So it's just really hard. And I actually think El Mencho was briefly a part of the police in Jalisco, one of the municipal polices. So
yeah, it's just so interesting because considering he went to go serve time in a U.S. prison and then he came back to Mexico to become a police officer. I mean, talk about that. What I'm sure that was an interesting transition, to say the least.
It's fascinating, but even growing up as somebody who's, identifies as Purépechan indigenous, who grew up in a Mexican neighborhood in LA, I can tell you that there was always murmurings of the young people in the community who obviously, there's several 100 kilometers between Los Angeles and the border in Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. But murmurings of people who would go to the military, get U.S. military training, go fight overseas in Afghanistan, and end up in somewhere like Kabul, and they would go and work for the cartels and use those same military tactics. If you literally Google, some stereotype cholo uses military tactics, you can see several videos online of some people who were involved in illicit activity, who went to the military, who came back and used military style tactics against local police or use them when they go back. I mean, you have to learn how to fly a drone somewhere. And yes, YouTube can teach you a lot, but you have to learn how to like drive armored vehicle somewhere or use landmines or grenades or ambush tactics. And these skills are coming from somewhere. And it's no surprise that El Mencho went to California State Prison, which is 90% plus a Latinx or Latin American, and came back with a whole new skill set, knowing that there is large amounts of organized crimes and gangs within these spaces. So it's almost like, yeah, you're like going to sort of like finishing school, but for like organized crime.
That's one way to put it.
Indeed.
We know the U.S. has already claimed some sort of capacity, of credit for El Mencho's killing. And even though the U.S. had allegedly provided some sort of information to Mexican officials, it really was the work of the Mexican government that can take credit for us. How do you see the development of how do you see this development impacting the U.S.-Mexican relationship? When we know that a big reason for Trump's tariffs was his desire to secure the border and to stop the flow of illicit drugs.
Sure. I think it's always important to note that a lot of the cartel violence and the organized crime violence is fueled by the massive demand for drugs that exist in the United States and the outflow of guns that are legal in the United States flowing into Mexico illegally. So tons of stories of people going from one side of the border, carting guns over, carting military equipment, and from places like New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, which have very, very lax gun control. And you can buy sort of like automatic rifles. You can buy everything you need to start your own little military. So I think that was always important to note. I think President Sheinbaum of Mexico has gone out of her way to note that, yes, the U.S. provided intelligence, but Mexican authorities were the ones who implemented this. They caught El Mencho. They attempted to bring him to justice, although it appears he died en route. And because of this, the U.S. needs to stay in their own territories. Obviously, tons of people are nervous, including us here in Canada, people who are living in Greenland, people who are living all over the world, people from Venezuela who just lost their leader, for better or for worse. So I think it's definitely a statement to say that, we respect you, we appreciate the intelligence, but please stay in your own territories and stay out of our sovereign territory.
As of Monday afternoon, more than 70 people have been killed so far, 25 of those from the National Guard. What do you make of how Mexican officials are handling the situation on the ground? Are they adequately responding to what's going on?
I think Mexican officials are doing the best they can. I think that this is a problem that has been existing for such a long time. As I said, potentially even from the late 1800s. It is infiltrated every single facet of Mexican life. I know this from going and visiting Michoacan and Jalisco and other parts of Mexico from the point I was a child to an adult, taking my children out to Mexico. I can tell you that the fear of cartel violence is ever present. In a previous conversation I was having today, there were some individuals or some Canadian tourists who were saying that they actually can't tell the difference between armed federal Mexican authorities and cartel individuals because they look the same, drive the same vehicles, and use the same weapons. So I think the Mexican authorities are doing the best they can. I think that any additional involvement from the U.S., actually sending troops, actually having people set foot on sovereign land is a bad idea for reasons that we've already seen. I think we're in a very complex and slippery slope in terms of political climate. And best everyone stay in their hood, as they used to say where I'm from.
Let's talk about the Canadians in Mexico right now. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand claims that there are more than 25,000 Canadians in the country as of Monday morning, with that number expected to obviously grow. She says as of now, there are no plans to send in the Canadian military or send in flights to bring Canadians home. You know, based on your previous answer, you think that she's making the right decision to keep everyone in their corners and let the Mexican government handle this as they'd want to.
I think it's complex. I think that in an ideal world, we would allow Canadians to make their way home when it's possible, when it's safe. I do think that there's going to be some individuals, and there probably are already, who are stuck and simply can't find their way back. So I would be a fan of Canada engaging in perhaps contracting charter flights, non-military assistance, helping people get from one place to another, perhaps where they can escape or leave safely. I know currently there is a sort of like shelter in place order, so I think all Canadians should stay where they are. Don't attempt to go anywhere. Stay right where you are until things settle down. Things will eventually settle down. The when part is the hard part. So I do think that sending any kind of military vehicles is complex, and no one should do that unless they have express permission from national authorities. I think people need to sit tight, and I know that's difficult. Doing that thing is extremely hard. But yeah, ideally get somebody away, or at least provide some kind of feedback for getting them out of this area, albeit I know it's complex given the current geopolitical situation.
During a press conference Monday morning, Anand also warned of potential mis- and disinformation circulating online and on the ground, and even local
Absolutely.
police in Cancun, warned of the same thing. How could mis- and disinformation play a role in the violence here?
That is a great question. I'm in the midst of starting a brand new project on the effects of disinformation and deepfakes on urban and rural Indigenous peoples here in Canada, and ideally in the US and Mexico eventually. But deepfakes are they're extremely dangerous. It's getting to the point where AI, or artificial intelligence, is so sophisticated that we can't tell the difference between a photo that is real or that is unreal. Perhaps a year ago now, there was a video circulating of Justin Trudeau, I think, flying a propeller plane through a forest somewhere in South America. It was full of cocaine. One of the students was like, "My grandma freaked out," and I was like, "Yeah, my grandma would freak out too." But yeah, so I think that we need to be extremely prudent when we're consuming media. We need to double, triple check it, especially if you are attempting to plot some kind of an escape or some kind of departure from an area that's dangerous. Make sure that you know what's happening. Make sure that you confirm that what you're seeing is in fact out there and is real. Be cautious. Don't believe what you see. Unfortunately, life has become more complex, but this information, it's everywhere. Unfortunately, some people, perhaps for better or for worse, are sharing stuff because likes and shares equals eventually some kind of monetary compensation. So we don't always have the best motivation for doing that. So be cautious. Don't believe it. Confirm. Always follow the protocols with local authorities.
Sounds like a true dad.
I got 3 kids. This is how we roll, as they say.
Jerry, how much longer do you think the violence and the chaos will last in the country during the fallout of El Mencho's death?
Oh boy. I think for this sort of like epi or microcurrent of violence, I give it 3 to 6 weeks. I think before things settle down, hopefully a little bit less. I think that's a conservative estimate. But truly, Mexico and everyday Mexicans have been caught in these cycles for a very, very long time. As I've been saying, at least 20 years, perhaps more. I think until we actually dig down and solve the issue of abject poverty in Mexico, of no access to formal means of making a living, and like I think it's just a gentle reminder that not everyone has access to education, healthcare, mental health services, and 3 meals a day, both in Michoacan or in Montreal or Toronto. So I think that we need to start off by meeting people's basic needs, ensuring that there's actually a way to move forward, and that's we're doing the best we can here with what we have. But until we sort of dig down on some of these root causes, prevent guns from continuing to flood Mexican streets that originate in the U.S. Do something about the massive demand for drugs that it's coming from the United States. We're going to be stuck in the same situation again. You have to address the root causes first.
Dr. Jerry Flores, thank you so much. Really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
And that was The Big Story. If you or someone you know is stranded in Mexico right now, please visit the Government of Canada's website at www.canada.ca for more information on safety. Let us know your thoughts on this conversation. You can find us online at Frequency Pods on Instagram, The Big Story on Blue Sky, or send us an email at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. Be sure to share this episode with someone you think may find it interesting. The Big Story publishes every morning, Monday through Friday, and don't miss our weekend listens. I'm Maria Kestane. Thanks for listening.
Hey, this is Bayard Winthrop, founder of American Giant. Back in 2011, I was fed up, sick of cheap disposable clothes that fell apart after a few washes, and even more sick of the fact that almost nothing good was made here anymore. So I started American Giant to prove something, that we could still make the absolute best hoodies, t-shirts, and pants right here in America, with American cotton, American factories, and American workers earning real wages. We exist to bring manufacturing home, create good jobs in towns that need them, and build clothes that actually last. No shortcuts, no overseas compromises. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code GIANT20 at american-giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code GIANT20 at american-giant.com.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. That's ziprecruiter.com/zip. ziprecruiter.com/zip.